Hi Botanical Medicine Club, Ryan here again. In today's video we're going to be making our calendula chapstick that we talked about last week. So before we get started, I just wanted to talk a little bit about calendula and why we're using calendula in this recipe. Calendula is my personal favorite for chapsticks and skin salves. It contains flavonoids, polysaccharides, bitters, resins, volatile oils, and minerals. And it's nice as a skin salve because it's anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and vulnerary. Some other herbs that you could use if you have them, or you can do a blend depending on your preference, are also plantago, chamomile, lavender, and achillea, also known as yarrow. These are really nice skin herbs that would make a wonderful chapstick. So with that, you can play around with the recipe. And we're gonna get started. So I'm gonna be adjusting the camera here just so you can see what I'm doing better. Okay, so I'm gonna start with this pot. This pot has some water in it so that we can create a double boiler. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the heat on. And here I have the half a cup of olive oil. We're just gonna put this in the water. And this is our basic double boiler setup. So the stove is going to heat the water and the water is going to heat the oil. So we're not heating the oil directly. So this is going to go ahead and get warm. I have it on high just to try to get it going. And once the water starts boiling, we can go ahead and reduce to a simmer. And I'm just going to go ahead and add the calendula. This is a heaping 2 tablespoons. If you're using other herbs, just do a blend that equates to 2 tablespoons. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in there. Get out a stirring spoon and just kind of stir that in. And again, once the water starts boiling, go ahead and reduce the heat. And we're just going to let this let the calendula simmer into the oil. Again, the oil's not going to bubble. The water in the pot is what's going to bubble. And we're going to let this do its thing for 20 to 40 minutes. Just keep an eye on it and sort of decide what time you want to use. I'm probably going to go ahead and just go for the middle and do 30 minutes. So I will see you back here when this is ready to go for the next portion. Okay, so our calendula has been infusing in the olive oil for about 30 minutes. Before we move on, I just want to talk for a moment about the chapstick containers. I'll be using just classic chapstick containers, and I'll be using this mold. This is very easy to find online. Oftentimes you can find the mold with the containers, and you just take the containers like this. You see they on the bottom how they screw up and down, and you just pop them onto the bottom of the mold like that. It's super easy. But if you don't want to buy something like this, just go ahead and use whatever containers you have around the house. As we discussed in the previous video, there's all kinds of containers, even just jars that you already have on hand, perfectly fine. Use whatever works best for you. All right, so with that said, we're now gonna strain out the calendula flowers from the oil. I'm just gonna adjust the camera so you can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so we have our calendula and olive oil, and I'm gonna go ahead and strain it out just to clear out the calendula. Just set that aside. And I actually want to use the smaller container, so I'm going to go ahead and pour the strained calendula back in here. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and put the calendula oil back into the warm water, and we're going to add the beeswax. So this is about a 1/4 cup of beeswax. It's actually a little bit more. I like my chopsticks to be a little bit firmer in consistency. And now we're just going to add this in a little bit at a time and let it dissolve. So we can add, you can start by adding probably about half your wax or so. And give it a stir. This will take a minute to start dissolving, but we want it all to dissolve. Okay, so the wax is starting to go. I'm gonna go ahead and bring the camera closer. Okay, so you can see the wax is starting to dissolve a little bit. This will take a minute for it to really start dissolving. So just kind of keep stirring in the wax until it's fully dissolved, and then continue to add a little bit of wax at a time. Alright, so while I continue to let the wax dissolve, I just want to talk about another method you can use. So this method we're using, how we infused the calendula in the oil, is a hot infusion. So we did it over the double boiler, and we heated it, and we did it in 20 to 40 minutes. Alternatively, you can also do a cold infusion of calendula oil. I have some that I made a while ago here, just in a jar. And all I did for this was I filled the jar with calendula and then filled it up with olive oil so the calendula was fully covered. And then you just let it sit for 4 to 6 weeks, shaking it, also what we call succussing. You want to succuss it regularly, daily if you can. And I just see my wax here is fully dissolved. I'm going to add a little bit more. And that method is a cold oil infusion. If you want to do that, you would just pick back up where we're at now, where you would pour your already infused calendula oil into the double boiler and start dissolving the wax. So that's another option if you wanted to try that out. I like this hot infusion method because it's pretty quick, and I don't usually have cold infused calendula on hand. I do happen to have it right now, but it's not normal. Okay, so I can see as I've continued to add the wax that it's starting to dissolve more slowly. So that tells me that the oil's probably absorbed about as much wax as we want to add. Just kind of keep an eye on it. I'm going to wait for this wax to fully dissolve. And once we think that we've added all the wax that we want, you're going to get out the spoon that you've had in your freezer. This is cold, so when we put a drop of oil on it, the oil is going to instantly harden because of the wax. And this is how we test the consistency. So I'm just going to show you here. Just put a little drop on the spoon. See it cool. And then just kind of, you can take the drop off, rub it into your hand, and just see how you like the consistency. So this feels pretty good. That's a nice chopstick consistency. I have just one little bit of wax in here that hasn't dissolved yet. I actually want mine just to be a touch firmer than that, so I'm just going to add a little bit more wax and let it dissolve. But you know, you can really tailor this recipe so that the consistency is what you want it to be. Okay. I'm just going to let this last bit of wax fully dissolve, and then we can go ahead and pour the chopstick into our containers. Okay, so our wax is fully incorporated into the oil. I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat off, And I probably don't need to use all of these containers. So I'm just gonna start on one end and pour the oil and make sure the oil fills up each container. If you're gonna do the same thing for whatever container you're using, just fill the container up all the way. If you're using small containers like this one, I would just line them up with the lids off and very carefully, slowly fill them up. And honestly, what's a bit easier is if you have some sort of dropper you can use to just slowly put the oil in. If you're using these, it will get a bit messy, but that's fine. Okay, so I'm gonna take my wax and oil out of there, and I want to pour this into the containers before it hardens. So I'm just making sure all of the containers get filled up. Okay, and now if you're using this type of setup, if you buy a mold, it'll come with a little spatula, and you can just sort of smooth out the tops to fill up the last few containers that didn't get a full amount of oil. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to show you what this looks like. Okay, so you can see that about half the containers are filled up. Okay, you see them, they're all full, and it's a little bit messy on the end, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let these fully cool, and then you just take them off and put the lids on them. And if you have labels, you can label them. And one last thing that I wanted to mention is if you wanted to add any essential oils to your chapstick, you would do that after the wax is fully incorporated before you pour it into the molds. Just drop in as much essential oil as you like, whatever scent you prefer. I don't like to put essential oils in my chapstick, so I didn't do that, but it's a nice touch if you want your chapstick to have some sort of scent. So that is our chapstick recipe. Again, once these are cool, you just put the lids on them and you are good to go and you have homemade chapstick. So we'll see you next time for our next recipe. Bye.